So it kind of progressively got worse, and my repeated MRIs over the next till 2018 showed repeated slow degradation of my neural system, and I was losing the feeling in my lower legs and having more and more difficulty walking. And
Jillian, how did you find Carnivore?
um, I was thinking about answering this question the other day, and it was really a long journey. Um, and it sounds easy, but it actually really wasn't. I started doing low keto in the 1990s when a friend of mine at work introduced me to Atkins' New Diet Revolution. I wasn't really able to, I mean, I did that pretty well. I lost 20 pounds on it, but it came back eventually in the 2000s because there really wasn't anything in the Atkins diet that told me about um, intermittent fasting. And really, I think for ketogenic diets, I think intermittent fasting is the key. I read some books by Jason Fung. But to get here where I am today, I had to go through pretty much a crisis. So my partner died. They got colon cancer, and I had gotten down from about 250 in the 90s to about 190, 180 in the early 2000s. And then that weight started picking up again. And when my partner died, I weighed about 233. I think I dropped back down to 200, and then it came back up to about 233. So I was bordering right there on the line on the BMI between overweight and obese. So I was just kind of bouncing off that lower limit. And I'd been diagnosed with MS back in 2000. So I'm referring to the 2018 period now. My partner died. And my MS was kind of there, but it was just a low kind of burn in the background. I never had any additional MS attacks. You know, when you get your initial MS attack, it'll sometimes paralyze half of your body in bits. And I had the claw hand. I guess it was my left hand. I was calling it the claw after we got back from a motorcycle ride down to Astoria. And so, you know, my neurologist, my MS doctor that I got at the time was all dour faced when she looked at the MRI and she said, "Oh, you have MS." And I said, "Well, whatever. I'm still the same person today that I was yesterday." But it was like everybody had these morbid expressions on them at the doctor's office. And I was like, "It's not that big a deal. Just fix it." Of course, there is no fix for MS, according to the MS doctors. So it kind of progressively got worse, and my repeated MRIs over the next till 2018 showed repeated slow degradation of my neural system, and I was losing the feeling in my lower legs and having more and more difficulty walking. And after my partner died, I was kind of depressed, and um, I was even having trouble getting up from sitting down on the curb. So if I climbed down to in my deck to work on it, and I tried standing back up, I actually had to kind of roll out of the hole in the deck to get back up onto the deck and stand up. And that was really bad. I thought there's got to be some way I can fix this. Just to backtrack slightly, I talked to my MS doctor about this slow degradation over time, and I said, well, it's kind of just like getting older faster, right? And my doctor looked at me and said, no, it's not like that at all. This type of neural degeneration doesn't happen in old people just because of aging. It's a function of your MS progression. I'm like, okay. So that was a bummer. And then I got my latest MRI in 2019, I guess, and it showed mass loss in my brain for both cerebellar and cerebrum. And I was like, wow. So I'm on my way to getting Alzheimer's on top of everything else. So 2020 rolled around and the pandemic was starting, and I couldn't stand up easy. So I just got to, I have to do something. And um, David Sinclair published a book that year at the end of 2020, and I bought a copy of it and I read it. And it's an incredible book. He's basically saying we can all live to be 125 if we can just figure out how to make our bodies regenerate themselves. And it was kind of a new idea to me. And he was talking about diet restriction, calorie restriction. And he talked a little bit about intermittent fasting. And so I picked up books by Jason Fung. And pretty soon at the end of 2019, I was losing weight back in the same kind of way that I did when I was on Dr. Atkins, but now I knew that the key was intermittent fasting. And I peeled off about 60 pounds between the end of 2019 and July 2020. And I have kept it off all the way to today. It goes up and down a bit, and I've discovered a few things along the way. One of the first things I discovered was that when I lost the weight, my lipids went up, and I ended up in Dave Feldman's phenotype lean mass hyperresponder, and that bothered me. So I got back to the library and I read several books by Malcolm Kendrick and some other books by Timothy Noakes, and they're all low carb people. And Malcolm Kendrick's, of course, is saying that. Oh, I also read um, Nina Teicholz's book on the Big Fat Surprise. That filled me in on a lot of information on what the statins. So they wanted you to statinate a lot, and my uh, my doctor said, well, you should probably start statins. And I was, after reading Malcolm Kendrick, said, no, I researched it. I don't think I should do it. Let's just see, because my level of lipids was just fine a few months ago, back in 2018, before I lost all this weight. And so he said, okay, we'll see where it goes. And about 2021, I became a sample in the lean mass hyperresponder study as well. So that was interesting to meet all the doctors down there and to get a couple of angiocardiograms from a really classy operation. And it verified, for me at least, that I wasn't getting calcification in my heart arteries, which was a relief for me. And it also let me push back on my endocrinologist who wanted to prescribe statins. Why she said this? Well, she said, my endocrinologist, you probably have FH, familial hypolipidemia. And I pulled out the genetic test from the study and say, I do not have FH, and handed it to her. And that was fun to do. And I also started doing David's own your own labs tests pretty frequently, probably several times a year, just so I could keep track of all my blood work. And I did learn something interesting about myself doing that. I was getting low hemoglobin and low red blood cell counts. And I thought, well, that's weird. And I asked on the group, and they suggested, well, maybe you have a MTFR genetic variation. And I looked on my genetic test that I got from Horvath's clock test, and sure enough, in that I did have an MTFR variant that was possibly causing me problems. So I supplemented with a methylated B vitamin supplement, and that actually took care of it. My blood levels came up to normal, and my uh, HSCRP came down to a more reasonable level. And so all that stuff kind of came in line. And I still do the supplement today to keep my hemoglobin up. That kind of brings me where I am today.
So these days, like how do you eat day to day?
Um, Today I actually had a couple of beef sticks that I bought at Costco, which are supposed to be low carb, but I did a blood test immediately afterwards, and it showed slightly elevated glucose, about 90. But I have a piece of brisket that I was going to cook after this interview. It's mostly meat. I stopped eating plants, although I've been I'm not a zealot about it. I'll still eat fruit in the summer. I had a apple that I picked off a neighbor's tree on a walk yesterday, and then I picked another apple off another tree a few blocks down. It's great because there's no pesticides on the trees that are grown in the neighborhood, and I feel really good about that. Whereas if you're buying apples in the store, you don't know how old they are or when they were picked or really how clean they are. But I know that nobody in the neighborhoods in Seattle puts pesticide on the trees that are growing out on the curb.
You're kind of eating when you feel just when you feel hungry, or do you have a pattern like
I
one meal
usually
a day? Or...
yeah, I usually have about one meal a day. Sometimes like the brisket, I might cook it in the morning and there'll be some left over, so I'll have some in the evening as well. It's the fat on the brisket that I like, but I also eat steaks or lamb, so pretty much any meat is okay. My realization that back in 2000, I kind of after reading Sinclair's book, he's kind of a veganish guy, and he says, well, to reduce mTOR, you need to reduce the amount of total protein you eat. And I read Paul Saladino, and I was looking at it, and I read Greger's books, his double-blinded studies, blah blah blah, and I thought this guy is great, and I learned all the stuff that Greger was teaching about plants, and then I read Paul Saladino's book, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, Greger's a vegan. I didn't know when I first picked up his books and read them. So that was a surprise. I eventually got rid of his books, but I think that 60 pounds I lost at the beginning of that keto episode was kind of following a serious fasting regime and eating according to what Gregor was saying about plants. I just cut the calorie intake way down. So I lost all that weight following a vegetarian's plan, not following and doing fasting, massive amount of fasting. So
So between 2019 and now, like how is the MS?
that is interesting because I, from losing the weight and also from starting to walk every day 2 to 3 miles, I managed to reverse a lot of that um, loss of feeling I was having in my lower legs, and I reversed the inability to stand up. I reversed the brain fog, and my migraine headaches that I was having every day went away. And all that stuff went bye bye when I started getting being a ketogenic all the time. And I learned during that time, I got a CGM from subscription from Nutrisense, and I kept that for over a year and collected about 5,000, 6,000 samples on that. And I also started doing Keto Mojo every day. So I take that several times a day back in 2000, 2000, 2022, 2021. But recently, last year, I've only been doing one sample a day. That's really all I need to verify. And so I try to keep the GKI down around the below 5 if I can. And it's been kind of around 5, 6, 10 this year on average. And that's because I'm eating too much of that Costco yogurt. It's full fat yogurt. But if you read the label, it says it's got uh, 20 grams of carbohydrates in it. So you can't eat it all in one sitting. You should really spread that out during the week, and I'm trying to cut down on that. My my I gave up all alcohol. Obviously, I have a glass of wine occasionally still, but I was down in Phoenix this week and ate at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Had a nice conversation with the waiter who was really surprised that he had somebody come in there that was just eating carnivore and they didn't want the vegetables on the plate or didn't want the salad. And I told him the old joke of, you can just feed my salad to the cow and I'll eat the cow. So, yeah, um, they don't have any bison at Ruth's Chris, but I did ask. So Costco does sell ground bison, which I like. It tastes richer somehow. And Paul Saladino got me to eat more organ meats. So you can get liver at the grocery store. It's got tons of vitamins in it, and it's frozen. And just take it out and bag it up into a couple of baggies separate because it's really bloody. So thaw it out and put it in the separate baggies, and then take out one baggie at a time to cook it and supplement the food. And it's, like I said, it's inexpensive.
Have people noticed a change in you in the last few years?
Yes, people noticed I lost weight. My sister thinks I'm eating a really bad diet now, and she's not going to do anything about it. She's like, "Well, I don't think you're eating right. I think you should eat more bread and stuff." I said, "I can't eat bread." She said, "Well, okay, I grant you that, but you have to eat more plants and stuff, and you won't eat dessert when we came over the other day." And I'm like, "No, I mean that's." I do that occasionally, and I always regret it later in the month because I had a piece of apple strudel at a picnic on the 4th of July, and that just wrecked my diet for the rest of the month. I was measuring my ketones and every day, and I was looking at that. My ketones dropped from the normal about one and a half, way down to like zero point 0.2 after the apple strudel, and it stayed that way for a week. So you just can't do it. Those things are sabotage in your diet, and you will recover from it if you don't continue to fall down that. And I noticed I had sugar cravings after that because I am a sugar addict without a doubt.
What does the future hold for you? Are you going to continue this path?
Yes, I'm hoping to lift a glass of wine for the 2100 New Year's celebration, maybe lifted in the Space Needle. And that seems like a stretch goal, but I think it would be possible to do it, assuming there's advances and the overall diet health can improve in the world, because I think we need to um, raise the health of everybody. And we have to convince, we have to show people that the bad diet that we're eating, I know Robert F. Kennedy is doing a lot of that right now. Um, Pushing for it, and he's done a lot of good work. But it shouldn't just be coming from one politician in the wilderness. It should be coming from the top of the federal government. They should be saying, "Look, we were wrong about this diet plan and wrong about the food pyramid," and they should say we should do a proper human diet, just like Ken Berry says, and we should go that way. But we've got I don't know if you read Robert Lufkin's book yet, Lies I Taught in Medical School, but that's an entire book, and he's mainly about getting people to not be diabetic. And if you walk down the street, you can tell people who are metabolically unhealthy because they're all overweight, and it's obvious for most of the cases that are in our society today, and it's really sad that we can't do anything about it to help. And like I said, Robert F. Kennedy seems to be trying to do something, get the word out. So more exercise. Hopefully, I'll be able to regenerate the nerves a little bit more in my legs and get all the feeling back eventually. And if I live to be 160, which will be 2,100, then I will succeed in regenerating all my nerves, I think. Um, that was something else I looked at since I wasn't really thinking about it at the time until my neurologist had told me that well your systems can regrow slightly, although brain cells don't really regrow. And I'm like, that's not entirely true, I'll bet. And the key for MS and for all neurodegenerative diseases is losing the fine capillary structure around the cells. And when you lose that, the cells um, die. And of course, you lose the fine capillary structure if your blood sugar is really high all the time, which is why a lot of kidney disease comes from being a diabetic, as does heart disease, because having high blood sugar strips that endothelium off the inside of your arteries, and the endotheliums that it's kind of like that slimy stuff on that you get on fish. So when the fish swim through the water because and the stuff on their fins kind of acts like Teflon to water, and your arteries have the same lining of the endothelium. That's these little hair-like structures, and it's really slick. But if you have high sugar levels, that endothelium gets stripped off, and then you can end up with problems on the blood vessels and get little clots and blockages. So I bought a couple of textbooks. I bought a copy of Regenerative Nephrology and read it, and I kind of did a critique of it. It doesn't have a lot about regenerating other tissues very much, and it doesn't talk at all about a ketogenic diet being helpful in tissue regeneration, but it obviously is. And then I bought a copy of Cancer is a Metabolic Disease from Thomas Seyfried, and that really is genius level stuff that's going on in the research on cancer and treating it as a metabolic disease. They have done amazing work in that area. So there's he's building on. He keeps referencing Warburg all the time. There's another little book about Sofhic called Ketone, the Fourth Fuel, which talks about the entire history of the discovering ketones is a proper way to fuel your cells.
Nice. So, if you were going to give someone advice about changing the way they eat to get healthier, what would you tell them?
Um, Mainly for my son is a good example, I think, because yeah, I keep trying to get him to eat better, and he keeps eating other foods, so I just take him shopping and I buy him meat for um for what he for what he needs because he claims that well meat's really too expensive. But that's okay. I can do it a slow piece at a time. And I point out that rice really has a lot of carbohydrates in it, and you shouldn't be making that a staple of your diet if you're trying to lose weight. And just, you know, I could say, well, you need to become a carnivore dieter, right? But even I'm not a pure carnivore dieter. I eat apples off my neighbor's trees. So I think all you can do is take it one bit at a time and point out that um, we're not overweight because we have an Ozempic deficiency. It's a it's the insulin that causes us to gain weight. And I was right there. Like I said, I was bordering on the obese range for years. So I'm really lucky now. I weigh somewhere between 160 and 170. Sometimes it's down below 160, and that's down from 230, and I've maintained that.
So, Jillian, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any social media or any way of getting in contact?
Sure, I have a account on Twitter, fire at Firefox underscore XB9R, and that's my call sign for my motorcycle when I used to ride. That's was Firefox, and XB9R is the motorcycle. It's a Buell Firebolt. And also I have a Facebook account, and I also obviously watch your YouTube videos, so I have a YouTube account. I even publish some small minor YouTube things out there, and you just look around and you'll find me. I make comments to just about everything that I shouldn't talk about. So I'm definitely a heretic. So
No, no worries. Well, I'll link to those in the show notes.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
so much for coming on and sharing your story, Jillian. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I appreciate it. Have a good day.